Hey there, it's Jerome Bragg's The Intuitive Self Healing Guide, who teaches spiritual seekers who've been diagnosed with a disease or a chronic illness how to return themselves to wellness through the practice of self love. So, in today's video, I want to share with you a term that I came across recently that really speaks to uh, the root of why disease manifests for us. You've heard me speak in other videos about the different causes for why disease manifests, but this particular term I came across really sums it up very perfectly. And uh, I want to speak about it in terms of my own experience, but it really applies to every single person I've ever worked with across the world who is dealing with the disease and what I found the root cause of that disease was for them, and also what all the studies and everything also talk about. So I want to share this term with you. And this term was created by Bruce Alexander, who was a professor of psychology. And the term is dislocation. Dislocation. And this term describes the process of feeling a loss of connection to the self, feeling a loss of connection to others, and feeling a loss of a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, like that your work and that doesn't have meaning or purpose, or that your life doesn't have meaning or purpose. And when we are chronically dislocated, um, this creates or manifests disease in us. Not that we're doing this on purpose, but our disease is an expression and a reflection of these three things. And I want to talk about this in terms of my own experience. I've done many videos where I talked about, why the diseases that I was experiencing manifested and what I learned about that after my near-death experience and the mystical journey that followed that. But this particular term just perfectly puts all of that into one term. So from now on, you're going to hear me talking a lot about chronic dislocation. But I want to talk about this from my experience. So, from my experience, the first part that was very true for me was I was experiencing a chronic loss of connection to myself. I had a very high and chronic sense of shame that spanned back to my childhood, where I felt shame for many areas of my life. I felt ashamed of my body. I was teased a lot in my childhood, and that teasing made me feel like because I wasn't thin, I wasn't attractive, I wasn't lovable, and there was something wrong with my body as it was. I also felt a sense of shame around my sexuality. I grew up in um, an environment, not just on my home, but in a culture and in a city and in a society that made me feel like being attracted to the same gender was wrong, was evil, and there was something wrong with me, and there was something unlovable about me. So that made me feel like a sense of shame with myself, and I never felt a sense of worthiness around my sexuality or a sense of worthiness around my body, which worthiness is connection to the self. It's feeling valuable, it's feeling lovable, it's feeling like a sense of appreciation and acceptance. And when we don't feel worthy, we don't accept ourselves. And so that non-acceptance is a disconnection from the self. So I felt very disconnected from the self in that way. I also had behaviors that stemmed from this feeling of not feeling being enough and not feeling worthy and lovable, where I wasn't really connected to myself. Right? I would hide my sexuality. I would hide my body, and I would also hide my psychic and intuitive gifts because I also grew up in an environment that was very Christian. And I felt that if I expressed my true, intuitive gifts and my psychic gifts, I wouldn't be loved, I wouldn't belong. So that was another disconnection for myself. I was suppressing my psychic and intuitive gifts, I was suppressing my sexuality, and I was just feeling a high level of shame around my body. So I was not connected to myself, and nor was I at that time. When I got initially diagnosed with the diseases that I had to heal from, I also wasn't trusting myself. I wasn't trusting my inner wisdom. I wasn't allowing it to guide me on all of my affairs. I wasn't really listening to it and spending time connecting in with my higher self's wisdom. I wasn't spending a lot of time, even though I was meditating, I wasn't spending a lot of time um, in nature or in stillness where I could really just let myself listen to myself. There was a lot of outside chatter from external authority figures that was making me go kind of here and there. And so I was very disconnected to myself. And this disconnection from the self, um, one disconnects us from our souls. It disconnects our soul's energy from our body. When we don't have a sense of worthiness, when we don't have a sense of trust in ourselves, we are not embodying the energy of the soul. As a matter of fact, the energy of our soul starts to shrink, starts to deplete. And this shrinkage and depletion robs our body of the energy that it needs to create and maintain wellness, which is the energy of our soul, the frequency of our soul. The other way that loss of connection to the self causes a manifest disease is it causes us to be in chronic stress. When we are feeling shame, like I was feeling, when we are hiding pieces of ourselves, when we are suppressing pieces of ourselves, that operates the fight or flight system in our body. And that floods our body with stress hormones, it suppresses our immune system, and all of that leads to stress. And it does so chronically. As long as we continue to be dislocated like that, we will continue to be in chronic stress like that, and that will manifest eventually disease. Chronic stress manifests disease. Chronic depletion and shrinkage of the soul's energy in the body manifests disease. So that was one way I manifested disease. I was also feeling a loss of connection to others. At the time that the diseases manifested for me in 2004, I had just graduated from college and I had moved to another city, and none of my friends from college were there. None of my closest friends were there, and I was experiencing a very high sense of loneliness. I was also not close to my family. I was living in Washington, D.C. at that time. None of my family was there or anywhere near there. And I was really starting all the way over, and I was starting all the way over from a sense of not feeling a sense of belonging. I was had to develop new friends, and I was developing friends, but I had a very strong friend group that I was missing, that I used to see a lot. I saw them a lot. I saw my friends, my closest and best friends, almost every day before that time. But when I had moved to this new city, I didn't see my friends at all. And right before I had moved to DC, I also had lost my best friend. He didn't transition, but we had a misunderstanding with each other, and no longer became friends. And this was my best friend, my friend that I spent. I would at least spend time with at least 4 to 5 times a week. And so I was feeling very isolated. I was feeling alienated, and I was feeling alone. And this again, those feelings have been scientifically proven to put the body into high chronic stress. And so this loss of connection to others was putting my body in high chronic stress, which was when we're chronically stressed, our immune system is highly suppressed. And it cannot fight off illness, and it cannot heal any illness that shows up. And so this was another way when we are chronically dislocated in the loss of connection to others, that we manifest disease. And then the last part of this for me was the loss of a sense of meaning and purpose. So at this time, around 2004, I had just graduated college and was in my first professional job. But here was the thing. I always knew that I wanted to, the thing that brought the most meaning for me and purpose for me wasn't working a traditional job. I wanted to be a singer, and I wanted to be a teacher of spirituality at that time. I knew that even when I was in college. I wanted to sing, and I wanted to teach spirituality and healing. And I wasn't doing any of that. I was feeling stuck in a 9 to 5 job. I wasn't pursuing singing anywhere. I had literally moved to DC because I believed DC was going to offer me more opportunities to sing. And here I was a year into DC and wasn't singing anywhere, wasn't teaching spirituality anywhere. And also at that time, my job, I was a counselor for men with HIV and AIDS, particularly black men and black queer men, bi men, queer and bi men. And at the initial, at the beginning part of my job, they were letting me teach meditation to my clients. They were letting me talk about alternative therapies and spirituality with my clients. But as time progressed, my supervisor uh, started to have some type of jealousy with me because I was being heralded around the city, as a matter of fact, because I was teaching meditation to different hospitals. I was leading support groups, and I was getting a lot of positive feedback. And this kind of triggered my supervisor at the time, who was going through some emotional wounds of his own. And so he took all that away. He made me he stopped my ability to offer support groups and teach spirituality to clients. He told me to stop teaching meditation and that I only needed to focus in on my client load, which I was always doing, right? I wasn't neglecting that. But I was also doing these other things that fed me. But he took all the other things away that fed me. So then the work I was doing started to feel monotonous to me. And I was feeling like I was disconnected from what gave me a sense of meaning and what gave me a sense of purpose and what was fulfilling kind of what I really wanted to do. Plus, I wasn't singing anywhere either. And I began to develop this high sense of a loss of meaning for me. I didn't enjoy my job anymore. And I wasn't enjoying my life. I didn't feel like my life was progressing and expressing why my soul came here. I wasn't feeling like I was fulfilling my soul's purpose or mission. And this was going on. This started to go on for several months, and it was a high sense. It wasn't a small sense. It was a heightened sense of this. And again, that sense of loss of connection to meaning and purpose shrinks the spirit. It shrinks the aura, and it also puts the body into chronic stress. So this is the shrinking of the spirit and the flooding of the body with stress manifested disease. And I also want to go back to the loss of connection to others and how it shrinks the spirit. Because one of the biggest things that we need, what our soul needs, our soul actually has needs as well. It has needs of nourishment, that it needs to, things it needs to get met so that it feels fed and so that it can expand in the body instead of shrink. And one of the biggest needs that it has is a sense of belonging and connection. So when we feel a loss of connection to others, when we feel like we have a loss of belonging and a loss of intimacy and connection, then the soul is not fed and it starts to shrink. And again, the shrinking robs the body of the energy of the soul, which it needs, because the energy of the soul is the fuel that the body uses to maintain and create wellness. So all of these things are part of dislocation: loss of connection to self, loss of connection to others, and a loss of sense of meaning and purpose. And all of these things put our body in chronic stress, and they serve to deplete and starve the energy of the spirit, of the soul in the body, which causes disease. So what I now, I have a term, I've talked about all of these things separately, but now I have a term to use, which is chronic dislocation. And this is what I found is at the root cause of every disease that I've ever worked with anyone with, is at the root cause of that, is that they have been chronically dislocated somehow. They've been dislocated, they've been disconnected from themselves. They've experienced a sense of disconnection from others. They're feeling lonely, they're feeling alienated, they're feeling isolated some type of way. And or they are experiencing a sense of disconnection from a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. Now, any one of these things, when they're alone by themselves, when they're held chronically, will manifest disease in us some type of way. But when we have all three of these things together, and they're all three of them are happening chronically, over a long period of time, we're definitely going to manifest some type of illness or disease from that space. So if you are experiencing a disease yourself, take a look at where you might have been chronically dislocated. Really take a pen and paper and sit down and look at, where am I not feeling connected to myself? And how is that showing up for me? Where have I not been feeling connected to other people? Like, where have I not feeling a sense of belonging and deep intimacy and connection with other people? And where have I not been feeling a sense of meaning and purpose in my life, like through my work and also in my overall life? Where am I not living my dreams? Where am I not really working in my passions? Where am I not having fun and experiencing pleasure? Where am I not doing what makes me feel a deep sense of fulfillment? And if you can look at those areas and address them, um, then you can begin to reverse the illness and begin to restore yourself to wellness. Because you will be, when as you begin to address these things, and this, because this was my path, right? I had to stop feeling a loss of connection to myself, which was for me addressing the shame that I felt. Instead of feeling shame and hiding and suppressing parts of myself, I had to feel appreciation and acceptance for myself and begin expressing myself. And that led me to a deep sense of worthiness, which turns off the fight or flight response. It stops flooding the body with stress. And it also, the more I begin to appreciate myself and express myself, that feeds my spirit, and my spirit stopped shrinking and it expanded. I had to look at really beginning to foster deeper senses of belonging, right? So instead of feeling isolated from people, how could I foster more connection? What did I need to do? There was a long list of things I had to do. I had to travel more. I had to really get out more and develop more connections where I was locally. But when I began to address my feelings of loneliness and isolation and alienation, that also released the stress in the body and began to feed my spirit, because I was feeding my sense of belonging and connection, which expanded my spirit, and that began to restore my health, and then also begin to look at how I could connect to the things that really brought me a sense of meaning. I began to really connect more in with my passions chronically instead of just sparsely. You know, my passion for singing, my passion for creating art, my passion for dancing, my passion for writing and teaching spirituality, my passion for helping people heal themselves, right? And as I began to prioritize and center and ground my life around that, I began to feel more fulfilled. I began to feel happier. I began to feel like I was fulfilling my purpose here on the planet. And that reduced the stress that I was feeling, and it began to expand my spirit's energy. My spirit began to expand in my body instead of shrink. And all of that was a source of why I healed and I returned to wellness. So this is the path, right? You've got to address where you're chronically dislocated. But I wanted to share that term with you. This new term that I found is probably an old term, but I just discovered it, and it's going to be showing up a lot in the future videos I talk about and the things I write about and teach about. So I wanted to share that with you. Look at where you're dislocated and get the help that you need to address those areas so that you're no longer dislocated, but that you are connected to the self and you are connected to your sense of purpose and you're connected to others. As always, I love you. Now go love yourself. Bye.